So lately I haven't been able to upload as frequently as I'd like to for a multitude of reasons. One of the more predominant ones is because I was playing this small little indie baby boy video game you might have heard of called Elden Ring. Elden Ring being From Software's most recent and critically acclaimed game to date, with some highly anticipated DLC on the way. My experience with From Software games prior mostly consists of the original Dark Souls. I won't go into it much as that game deserves its own video from me. The Cliff Notes version is that I've played through the game several times and I do find it to be one of the top best games in the past few decades. Of course, Demon's Souls was the first game to start this journey, but most would probably agree that it was Dark Souls that really kicked off the success that From Software would then acclaim. I dabbled into Dark Souls 2 a little bit, but didn't get far as I genuinely wasn't liking what I was playing, and it's probably for reasons you wouldn't think. I played quite a bit of Dark Souls 3, and you know what? Even though I haven't finished it, from what I've played, I can certainly see it as the most balanced and well-rounded Dark Souls in the franchise. Unfortunately, various complications I was going through at the time forced me to stop playing for a bit, and I simply haven't been able to find the motivation to go back to it since. But I really did enjoy what I played and might find it to be the best Dark Souls, despite my personal admiration for the first game. I have not touched Bloodborne or Sekiro simply from not having much interest in these games due to my own personal tastes in video games. I'm not usually attracted to super long, challenging games where people boast how it'll take 60 to 100 hours to beat. That simply doesn't sound too appealing to me, as I'd much rather clear out several games in that allotted time. Though that is just personal preference in my case. With that said, I did not have much interest in playing Elden Ring, even with all the attention and critical praise it's received since its launch. It wasn't until I received Elden Ring as a gift, which more or less required me to play the game to honor the exchange of said gift. I wasn't all too intimidated by the game other than its difficulty and length, since from what I've heard from the grapevine, the game is extremely long and one of the hardest in From Software's lineup, and it's not even fair difficulty coming from the more diehard fans. I can say at this moment in time that I have indeed beaten Elden Ring, and I am prepared to share my first impressions. That's right, first impressions, because frankly, despite this game being as ginormous as it is, it begs for multiple playthroughs to thoroughly form fully conclusive thoughts. Plus, my playthrough probably isn't one I'd be comfortable making any real critiques on, considering how I went about it. I will say, booting the game up initially, it did feel very comfortable to jump right in. People describe this game as Dark Souls 4, and that really isn't a hyperbole. I'm not sure how Bloodborne or Sekiro differ, but this game really feels just like a Dark Souls game with how it controls, how all the actions and buttons are placed, to all the other core mechanics from inventory, leveling up, NPC quests, etc. I do want to mention now that I did not take any notes during my playthrough. I didn't want to constantly pause to write shit down, and I wanted the actual playing experience to be as real as possible. So I may not have matching footage to match anything I say, and even then, after a while, I stopped recording because this game is taking hundreds of gigs on my hard drive space, and frankly, I'm pretty sure I don't need any more than that. Another reason why this is only first impressions is because even after beating the final boss, I have no idea what this game is about. Oh, of course, there's lore dumps all throughout the game, and like other games with a story mostly told through lore, it's up to the player to piece many things together, and with how my playthrough turned out, it was rather challenging to do that for me. Luckily, all these games to me are an adaptation of the Robot Master Screen from Mega Man games. I don't really care about the underlying lore or the real story of the game, at least not at this moment. But as far as basic gameplay, it really is just, here's an open world, go kill some hard-ass bosses in any order you want. And that's basically it. The first 16 hours of play I did solo, and even then, all 16 hours of it could be considered tutorial because at no point did I feel like I had a complete grasp of all the core mechanics and how the open world worked. I did appreciate the game offering a linear progression of tasks, which to me is the key of making an open world more accessible without alienating hardcore fans of this structure. I spent my first many hours exploring, finding items, collecting loot, and seeing how this game updates the gameplay from the previous games. Having a jump button is shockingly a really big game changer. Older action-adventure games may have shown that having more context-sensitive jumps is perfectly doable, but a real difference is made when the player has a fully manual jump button. It did take a bit to adapt techniques I was familiar with from the previous games, but otherwise I do feel this game executes it better, just because it has a manual jump. We also have horse gameplay, which surprisingly isn't all deep in the grand scheme of things, at least not that I know of. Torrent just seems to be a basic means of faster transportation, and most of your combat abilities carry over pretty naturally on horse. I'm not going to lie, I think I enjoy the horse gameplay of this game more than Breath of the Wild. I mean, in all fairness, the two really aren't comparable as both try to accomplish different things, but as someone who really enjoyed the horse gameplay from Twilight Princess, especially when it comes to combat, Torrent felt like a natural evolution of that, and I really appreciated it. It's a primary example of good control and game feel triumphing over realism. Breath of the Wild is more cinematic visually, but ask anyone, the horse controls are so relentlessly stiff and restricted with how much terrain can get in the way. Torrent controls much more responsively by comparison. Again, ultimately not that comparable, but I can say I certainly had more fun with one over the other. When it comes to basic combat, it felt very familiar to what I was already used to. I'll say now, I'm mainly a basic sword shield kind of guy. I'd like to keep things old school. I love the new riposte ability when blocking an enemy attack. Feels really good to do, and feels like the perfect compromise to not being a master at parrying. The parry itself is now stripped from your basic abilities, now being relegated to the new Ashes of War, which are basically exclusive moves you can apply to weapons and shields. I would be more excited to use the parry Ash of War, but unfortunately the timing is so unbelievably delayed that I lost all interest in using it. It didn't take long to get accustomed to how the open world is structured. You have your core areas, which more or less feels like the same sort of design you'd find in the other From Software games, but when it comes to the open world, the actual space in between them, it was shockingly easy to get the hang of. There are these dungeons that offer their own isolated challenges. Same goes for some caves and mining systems, usually carrying valuable materials. You got your castles, forests, all populated with enemies that will undoubtedly rip you a new one. The bosses are, of course, the best part of the game, and the one thing that really kept me going, as I get most of my enjoyment from taking these guys down. If I can interject a little nitpick, which isn't even an actual critique, more like an artistic preference. But the game now has predominant music throughout, in the overworld, during enemy encounters, in dungeons, everywhere. I'm not saying the music is bad, far, far from it. This game has a killer soundtrack. But what I've always really liked in the previous games, mainly Dark Souls 1, was the restraint on music, only being used for bosses and select key areas. It's a small thing, but it made those moments of the game extra impactful. You really felt like you were experiencing a fairy tale legend when the bombastic score kicked in. That kind of feeling is sort of diminished for me when there's music all throughout the game now. I get it though, as many people found the lack of music distracting, so it all comes down to taste. The bosses have a lot more cinematic flair with flashy animations and unpredictable patterns, and the challenge did feel the most disproportionate here. Never before has the boss and enemy aggro felt more aggressive in this game than the previous ones, to my recollection. It's relentless, and this is where most of the frustration lies. Luckily, there's a new addition that's probably my favorite new addition for these games: the spirit summons. So in Elden Ring, there are these summons you can acquire which can range from various overworld enemies, to previous mini-bosses, to even a clone of yourself, to fight alongside you, when the game allows for it, as there are areas that prohibit summons. Either way, this ended up being my new favorite mechanic, as I feel it's a fantastic alternative to online co-op, and for simply being a means to take away enemy aggro. It's honestly amazing how much more balanced the difficulty gets when your foe can be distracted for just a few seconds to allow you to attack, heal, collect your bearings, or what have you. It's a small thing, but it goes a long way and makes just about any obstacle feel possible, no matter what level you are. It's like summoning the NPCs for bosses in previous games, but applied to the main overworld, and I think that kicks ass. Speaking of co-op, I suppose I should now mention that I did play the game with online co-op with my younger brother. In fact, most of my playthrough of the game was done with online co-op. In fact, everything after the first 16 hours was done with online co-op. This is the ultimate reason why, even after finishing the game, I'm only comfortable calling my impressions first impressions. Because while playing the game online is tremendously fun, I don't feel confident using that experience to judge this game as a whole. My younger brother is a huge fan of these games and has put in thousands of hours into all of them and is practically a walking, talking From Software encyclopedia. He's the one who bought the game for me and wanted me to play it. He insisted on doing some co-op with me, so after my first 16 hours, I agreed. It was actually really funny because I remember how when we started playing, he asked me what I was doing at the time, and I said, "Oh, I just reached to the top of the Tower of Caelid," and his first reaction was, "What the fuck are you doing there?" It was satisfying to think I was messing around in a very late game area pretty early on. This was how I played through the rest of the game, with him guiding me around, giving me lore exposition, and showing me all the key locations and bosses. I will humbly admit, playing co-op was a hell of a lot more fun compared to the fun I was having solo. I mean, this goes without saying for most games, I'd say. Online co-op is a crack-addicting form of recreation that can be very hard to stop until it's 5 in the morning and you can see the sun already start to rise. There is a case to be made with how playing with co-op does make the game substantially easier. My brother is a From Software master and can breeze through most parts of the game no problem with raw skill, knowledge of the world, and his overpowered builds. It makes it hard to gauge the real challenge of the game when you literally have someone else do the heavy lifting for you. I'm not going to go too deep in the discussion of difficulty with these games. I'll say my personal stance is that no, I don't feel these games need an easy mode, though I wouldn't be opposed should they ever do such a thing. I mean, so many people go on about how essential the challenge is for these games, which I won't deny the merit in that, but I will honestly say that my enjoyment of the game did substantially increase when the game felt easier, thanks in large part to co-op. I won't advocate for cheating in most cases, especially with co-op should someone have malicious intent, but damn, is it really any better than cheating when you have a summon partner give you ass loads of runes and other valuable materials that ultimately make the game easier? I guess for what it's worth, I still died a shitload of times even with co-op, especially during bosses. But even so, can I really give a useful assessment on a boss when you have a partner shred all its health with a goddamn super laser? Don't get me wrong, I preferred playing the game this way, but for all you purists, I can't imagine you thinking this was a legitimate playthrough. I can't be too sure, as some people I've spoken to say that it's totally fair since I'm still within the boundaries of what the game will allow that doesn't involve cheating. There are other natural consequences that come from playing with co-op, mainly in regards to the story and really getting to know this world as well as I would have liked. Despite finishing the game, I have no idea what this game is about. Like, really, I have a vague understanding of what's going on, but I can't remember what the actual core plot was, who most of the characters were, or what the state of this world really was. It didn't matter that much as, again, for me, the core plot was go kill a bunch of bosses. And from what I understand, most fans of this game also feel that way. And it's why multiple playthroughs of this 1,000-hour game is somewhat warranted. All the more thankful there are countless lore explanation videos on YouTube to provide the detailed Cliff Notes version. I would like to do a New Game Plus playthrough, but not right now. Not for a while. Apparently I have done all the core content within the game outside of extremely minor stuff and character quests, which I hear can be quite the time sink. I really enjoyed the character quests in Dark Souls, so I hope the storylines in Elden Ring can be enough to hold my interest. I also plan to exploit some kind of room farm or glitch to get my character as maxed out as possible within the boundaries of my own patience. Considering how much more challenging New Game Plus gets with these games, I can't help but feel obligated to do that. Luckily, and this comes from my brother, but maxing out level stats ultimately don't do you much good against this game's relentless difficulty. It won't make that much of a difference, so it'll still take pure player skill to overcome the difficulty. So that's nice. With all that said, I did very much enjoy my time with this game. Exploring the land, discovering new things, kicking ass, getting my ass kicked. It was all a great time. My total playthrough was around the 60-hour mark, and I guarantee if I wasn't playing co-op, I'd still probably be trying to beat the game well over the 100-hour mark. Maybe for some, that just sounds fantastic. But for me, that will probably do it for my first impressions. All in all, good game. Damn good. Definitely deserved its critical acclaim and Game of the Year. I do intend to do a New Game Plus, just not for a while. I would also like to take time to play through all the games I missed and finish the ones I haven't. Though I can't say I'm interested in making videos on them. There's plenty of multi-hour long videos of people deep diving into these games, and I don't think I have anything else to really add to the discussion. Maybe things will change, but we'll see. I want to thank those who've watched the video up to this point. The next few videos are pretty set in stone, so hopefully it won't take me too long to crank them out. Though I am trying to allocate time to playing other games from my notorious backlog, so we'll see. I'm also going on vacation soon, which may cause the delay of this video or the next one. With all that said, the only thing I really have left for the day is to say thank you for watching.